Today the world continues to be ravaged by COVID-19. People are feeling anxious, impatient, frustrated, and critical. We are less busy with the things that normally hold our attention. We are bored with staying inside. We are upset that we're not able to see the people we love and doing the activities that animate us. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired. The more cooped up we feel, the angrier we get. And our often anger removes the kind and gentleness within ourselves, turning us bitter and critical. As humans, we often express our stress and our loneliness and things that we cannot control by becoming critical of other people and saying things that we might not otherwise say. I'm reminded of Jim Laney, who was the president of Emory University for a number of years. And he tells how he learned how your words can really hurt other people when he was 4 years old. He had an aunt who was crippled by polio, so crippled that the only way she could walk was to use 2 crutches. She came to visit at Laney's home, and he was out in the garden while she sat on the porch, and he was doing his favorite thing that he had been told over and over not to do. He was stomping on the flowers in the flower garden. His aunt just looked at him and calmly said, "Jimmy." He knew he had been caught, and he figured the only way that he could get out of the situation was to strike back. So in his biggest 4-year-old voice, he said, "I don't have to listen to you. You're just an old cripple." And he escaped and ran around to the other end of the house. Free at last, he thought. And a little later, as he walked into the house, he walked past the room where his aunt was staying, and he saw her stretched out across the bed, just sobbing and crying over what he had said. The guilt overwhelmed him. And he learned at that young age how the words we use can hurt other people. And friends, anger and angry words never do anything to improve the situation. But it's also human nature that we want things done our way. You remember the song from Frank Sinatra, "My Way"? We often live that way. And if our situation gets too bad, it's not long before we throw ourselves a pity party and we end up in complete despair. It was into such a world that Jesus came. And the day that he spoke the words in our passage, directly before that, he was preaching a sermon about an entire generation that was living out of spite and out of anger and living out of criticism of one another, and how bad the entire generation had become. And this was soon after his cousin John the Baptist had been put in prison. And I'm sure he was probably feeling a twinge of fear about what might happen to him in his ministry as a result of what happened to John the Baptist. But after he admonished the people, we know that Jesus always ended things on a positive note. To that angry, spiteful, critical, fearful, bitter generation, he said, "Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Now, what was Jesus saying? There's a legend that Jesus, before beginning his earthly ministry in his silent years, was a very gifted carpenter. And what he was known most for was building yokes to yoke ox together to do work. And it's said that people would bring their ox teams, always two and only two, to Jesus, and he would take a measurement of their height and their width and how close they were to be to one another in front of what they were pulling. And then 2 weeks later, they would come back, and the yoke that held those ox together as a team was so perfectly made, so well-fitting. And if it didn't fit well, then Jesus took the time to chip here or chip there until it was a perfect fit. Come to me, all ye who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My burden is light, and my yoke is easy. Friends, that was an invitation to those folks then, and I contend that it's an invitation to us today as well. Because Jesus was offering to yoke himself to us as individual followers and disciples of Jesus. Now, picture that for just a moment. Picture how much better life would be if we knew that we were yoked to Jesus and that the fit of that yoke was absolutely perfect. And Jesus would be right there beside us. I think that we need to implant that idea into our minds and our imaginations. For friends, as I said at the beginning, these are difficult times. Nothing seems normal. But if we remember that Jesus is no more than 2 feet away from us, I believe that our burden is less, and he will give us the rest from the weariness of the day. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.